Hello, I'm Simon. Welcome back to the workshop. Today I'm going to be building a cheap digital height readout for my cheap Chinese router lift. Let's get tinkering. Now, I've been wondering if it was possible to modify a cheap pair of calipers to work as a height gauge for my router lift. When I came across a digital readout kit that you can buy, it's not designed for routers, it's designed for machinery, but they're pretty cheap at about £20. They come with a slide that moves up and down and measures how much distance it's travelled. Comes with a cable connecting to a readout which I'll have to mount somewhere, and some mounting hardware. So I'm going to see if I can fit this to my router lift. The first thing I need to do is remove the router lift from the insert plate and then just have a look at it and work out a strategy for fixing the slide to the lift. If you want to learn how to make these custom springs, then have a look at my previous video to this one. I need to take these brackets off because I need to mount this at 90 degrees to the face that it currently wants to mount to. So I'm going to take it off, bend it, and then it'll be able to be mounted underneath the router table. So I put it in the vise and use a hammer to reshape the bracket. So let me explain what I'm trying to achieve here. This piece moves up and down because it's gripping the router. So you can see that here. So when it's all the way up, I need this not to foul or get in the way of anything so that I get the maximum height. So to do that, I know that underneath this I've got a piece of wood that this plate sits on, which is about 10 millimeters. So I'm going to have to fit this with a gap here of about 10 millimeters. So what I'm thinking is if I can fill this area here with a piece of wood, I can then glue this in place onto this piece that moves, and then this piece will be screwed up into the wood that's holding this plate in place. So then when this comes down like that, this will move down with it, and then when it goes back up, it will move back up with it. It also means that I don't need the whole travel of this linear rail. I really only need it to go to here. So I'm going to cut it here just so that it's not sticking out too much. I don't want it sticking out past the back of the router because when the table folds up, there isn't much room between the back of the router and the side of the bench. So I'm back at the vise, cutting the rail to length. Note that I'm clamping the vise on the waste side because I don't want to damage the rail in any way, other than cutting it in half, of course, which will probably invalidate the warranty, although I doubt it's got one. I then use a file to clean up the burr. Then using a small scrap of hardwood, an old chair leg as it happens, I start to shape the mounting bracket. I then hand sand until it fits. So I've shaped this piece in here so that it's friction fit. I've pushed it in there, I can't actually get it back out again, and it's about 0.5 millimetre to 1 millimetre proud of these surfaces here, so that the slide doesn't get in the way of these surfaces. I'm going to glue the sensor to the wooden mount using some 5-minute epoxy. I tried clamping, but that didn't work, so I end up using some insulation tape. And I'll leave it to dry. Now the glue's set, I can remove the tape. Those will work. I bent these brackets to this angle so that I can get a decent viewing angle when this is on here. The control panel and display comes with a number of mounting options. It comes with this little bracket that just comes off with a couple of screw holes so that you could screw it into a piece of wood. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use these brackets that I've made, and there are magnets here, so I'm just going to stick it on using the magnets. The benefit of that is if I knock it, it'll just come off the brackets and is unlikely to actually do any damage, whereas if it's fixed permanently and I knock it, it's more likely to get broken. I now pilot and screw the brackets in place. I now refit the springs and then attach the lift to the insert plate. I forgot to put the screw on, so I have to take it all off again. Okay, so I have this set to 0 and this set to 0. Let's raise this up, say to 10. There you go, 9.99. What's a hundredth of a millimetre between friends? Now that says 10.5, half a millimetre discrepancy between the two. I'm not sure that I'm happy with that. Let's just do the experiment again and see if it's something to do with the way I measured. Let's take it down again. Let's make sure I register on exactly the same point. Right, that's on 0. If I 0 this, now let's go up to 10 again. 10.1, 10.05, so that's 0.05 of a millimetre difference. So I think the first time must have been a measurement error. Okay, so another experiment here. I know this is exactly 20 millimetres, and I've got this so that it's just not touching. I'm now going to wind it up so it's right at the top. Now I can't see what that measure is saying, so I think it's there now. What does that say? 19.8. I'm pretty happy with that. What does that say now? That says 20 now, pretty much. That seems about right now. So if I take it down and bring it back up, let's see if I can do that again. I think that's about there. What's that say? 19.94. So it is measuring properly and it is measuring the height correctly. So I'm really pleased with that. We'll have to wait and see how reliable it is long term, but as a simple solution, this does appear to measure the up and down on the router bit. What I should now try is actually routing something and seeing if it actually does route the hole at the right distance. I'll set the bit height using the height gauge to 5mm. I'm now going to route this piece of 18mm ply. Let's see how well it does. Now if we look at this, it basically shows 13mm. This is 18mm ply, 13 plus 5 is 18mm, so that's done really well. There is a problem with this approach that I've discovered, and that is the router is generating interference sometimes with the digital readout, and it can change the measurement that the digital readout says that it has. Now I found that through experiment that if I turn the digital readout off while I'm routing, then there isn't a problem and it seems to maintain the value that it had when it was turned off. But if I keep it on while I'm routing, then sometimes it'll go to 0 or it'll go to just some random number even though the router hasn't moved. So this was an interesting experiment, adding a digital height gauge to a cheap Chinese router and router lift and insert plate. I wouldn't say it was entirely successful. It does work with some limitations, and for that reason I don't think I can recommend you doing this to your outer table. If you've got any questions, then please leave them in the comments. If you haven't already, then please subscribe, and if you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.